Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. Thomas Tuchel faced his first major challenge as his Chelsea side visited Mourinho's Spurs. Both clubs needed the win to keep the top four firmly in sight, and in the end, the game ended 1-0 to Chelsea thanks to a Jorginho penalty. The XG indicated it was a deserved win, with Chelsea underperforming their 2.39 XG compared to Spurs' 0.57. The XG time map suggested that offensively, there was only ever one team in it, particularly once Chelsea went ahead. But what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a look. A quick shout out to my Patreons for helping to make this video possible. If you want to support, head on over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple and you'll get rewards like early access to videos and exclusive content. And here's how Tuchel and Jose lined up, with Mourinho sticking to his 4-2-3-1 and Tuchel his 3-4-3. If you want to keep up with the latest match updates, news, stats, and more for your favorite teams and players, check out the OneFootball app. It's absolutely free for iOS and Android, and it helps to support the channel. Click the link in the description below to get it. Let's start with what Chelsea did on the ball, as they had the majority of it, with 58% possession. Spurs didn't look to press particularly high up, ending with a passes per defensive action of just over 12, as they often sat in more of a mid-block. This meant that Chelsea were often able to come through the first phase relatively unchallenged. Marcos Alonso and Reece James in particular were key to providing the width, moving high and wide early, pinning the Spurs fullbacks deeper. And this is where Spurs' defensive problems began. In the default build-up shape, Vinicius would be outnumbered. However, when the ball went to Thiago Silva, Son tended to come more narrow. So Azpilicueta at times operated as a more traditional right back, stepping into the space to receive the ball. As a result, he had the most touches in the game and passes with 83. And Mourinho's 4-2-3-1 when defending shifted initially to more of a narrow 4-2-2-2, as the Spurs fullbacks could be 1 versus 1 with the Chelsea wingbacks, and Mourinho looked to prevent the central overloads instead. A major problem was that, uncharacteristically of a Mourinho side, the defensive unit was not compact and didn't defend as a whole. The front four was very much a distinct pressing unit, as Sissoko and Højbjerg stayed deeper, trying to stay tight on the inside forwards, which they did manage at times. This was disadvantageous higher up though, as they were always a man short against Chelsea's deep five, and this explains why we often saw a centre-back, usually Rudiger or Christensen when he came on, able to dribble deep into the Spurs' half. And Chelsea's front three on the pitch more commonly had Mount in the hole, operating in a free role, popping up everywhere as we can see in his touches. Whilst Werner and Hudson-Odoi operated slightly wider in the half spaces. If Sissoko or Højbjerg dropped deep to track an inside forward who had pushed high to prevent the Spurs fullback being overloaded, it left acres of room for Mount or any of the forwards, as they were highly fluid, to receive the ball and turn, looking to play the runners in behind. But the right was Chelsea's preferred attacking channel. With Spurs' front four so narrow, Azpilicueta would often move higher up the pitch to form an overload on this right wing, with James and Hudson-Odoi. This caused massive problems whenever Højbjerg came across to even things up, as it left a gaping hole in zone 14 that Mount could once again drop into to receive, to turn and look to create, usually finding Hudson-Odoi or James, depending on who Davies was looking to stay tight on. Mourinho did adapt his defensive shape as the match went on, with Son and Bergwijn defending wide to prevent the centre-backs progressing. However, Ndombele would often then be 2 versus 1 down against the Chelsea pivots, so could easily be found. When Højbjerg or Sissoko looked to join, this again left a man free between the lines to receive. Alternatively, Kovacic in particular could turn a marker to advance into the space, but was often unable to find the right pass. On the transition, Spurs could look dangerous at times. This was the case when both Kovacic and Jorginho had advanced high in the attacking phase. Spurs could then look to directly go into Vinicius, who could then lay it off for Son, for Spurs to advance. They got into decent positions, but the defensive numbers could usually smother them out. Now, let's briefly touch on what Spurs did on the ball. More often than not, Lloris would go long to Vinicius from the goal kick, ending with double the long balls of Mendy. Vinicius did win the joint most long balls in the game, but with the lack of numbers around him, it didn't come to much. When Spurs did go short, their centre-back split wider with a full-back slightly higher, and Chelsea could look to press high. Hudson-Odoi often joined Werner in the central press to create a 2 versus 1, whilst Mount and a pivot pressed Spurs' midfielders deep. Crucially, the extra centre-back meant that Chelsea could commit their wing-backs high, making it difficult for Spurs to play out. And when they did get higher up the pitch, both fullbacks tended to be high and wide, and on the right, Sissoko would move across to cover the space. The central men could then force Chelsea's defence more central, freeing up the fullbacks to cross into the now overloaded box. This did lead to one decent chance for Vinicius near the end of the game. But ultimately, Spurs were never able to be a threat consistently enough. I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. If you did, a like would be much appreciated. Overall, despite the scoreline, this match was never close, with Tuchel outdoing Mourinho essentially from start to finish. The most tactically important players today, in my view, were Azpilicueta in the build-up, Kovacic consistently breaking the press, and Mason Mount continuing his impressive start under the German. But what did you make of the match? Drop it down below with a fire emoji somewhere in your comment. A detailed look at Tuchel's general tactics is also linked at the end of this video. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.